Let's talk about the Hebrew alphabet now. And that's a little bit of a misnomer because it's actually technically an abgad or an abjad, depending on how you pronounce it, which is a alphabet with no vowels, just consonants. And you can sort of see, interestingly enough, the terminology alphabet coming from a little bit of a remove from Hebrew and a Phoenician background, but the first two letters of Hebrew are Aleph and Bet, and we have Aleph, Bet here. Obviously that will come through Greek as alpha and beta, and so it's sort of like a combination of the two. And we're going to walk through writing and speaking the various Hebrew letters to make sure that we've got a good sense of what's going on. Now, one of the things you'll quickly notice is that there's a calligraphic way that most of the letters will be presented in textbooks and grammars and in your Hebrew Bibles. We're not asking you to learn how to do the calligraphy. Rather, this will be sort of a simplified way of doing the letters, but it should make the calligraphy a bit more graspable about what's going on, but you don't need to learn how to do all of the calligraphic strokes. Rather, you will want to know how to read it, though, when you see it on the page. And the writing we're going to do is very similar to the calligraphy, just a simplified form. So let's start with the first letter, Aleph. And so you do a stroke down and then sort of think of it as two arms. I often think of it as if you put a head here and legs here, you've got a man who's going on a walk. Or a lady. I don't mean to limit that there. And so we're really going into our alphabet. Now the sound that this makes is a little bit strange. It doesn't make one at all. Aleph is a silent letter, and so no sound will be made from it. So notice that this is not comparable to the English letter A, which is a vowel. Rather, that this is a consonant, which has no phonetic sound value. The next is Bet, and Bet appears in two forms, and so I'll write them both. With the dot and without. This dot is called the dagish, and it changes the pronunciation of the Bet. So when it has the dagish, it's a hard B sound, B. Without, it's a softer V sound, V. All right, so B and V. You can just learn them as the one word Bet, though, but be careful whenever you see that dot to give it that B sound. The third letter, unlike English, is not C, but as in many other alphabets, is the G sound, and it is the word, or the letter Gimel. Gimel, G, G, Gimel. Gimel can also appear with or without a dagish. However, the sound does not particularly change. After Gimel, we have Dalet, which again can appear with or without a dagish. And one of the things that you may have noticed about a couple of these letters so far is that they have little lines that stick off to the sides. These are called tilde, or to use the old King James terminology, tittles. So not a jot or tittle, as our Lord talks about in the Gospel of Matthew. Well, this is what we're talking about. These little lines are often the difference between these letters being what they are here and these letters as they might be conceived of later. So if we don't have the tilde on the dalet, we could confuse it for a resh. If we don't have the tilde on a bet, it could conceivably be confused for a kaf, although the kaf is a little bit of a smoother, rounder drawing. And so those tildes are vital when you are writing your Hebrew alphabet. Moving on in our Hebrew, we get to the hey. Hey is two strokes, just like that, and it is our H sound, our sound, sort of a rough breathing sound. It will act as both a consonant and a vowel carrier. And after hey, we have vav. And vav is a little stroke downward with just a little hook at the top. And this is going to be another one of our V sounds. Originally, it was probably a W sound, but it has since morphed over time into a V. This is going to be a much used letter, but it can also be a vowel carrier as well. And when it is a vowel carrier, it has no consonantal sound. Rather, it will only carry the vowel. So if you've got a Holem Vav, for example, and we'll talk about that with vowels, you would pronounce it O, not Vo. If it's got a Shurek, you pronounce it U, not Vu. After Vav, we have Zayin. And this one looks similar to our Vav, but notice that it has sort of a diagonal top to it with tildes on both sides. So the Vav has a little tilde on the front. This has it in two places and has that sort of diagonal stroke downward. This is our Z sound. Z, Zayin, Zayin. After Zayin, we have a letter called Chet. And notice I had a little bit of that gutturalness there in speaking it. And it looks a whole lot like hey, but notice it is connected the whole way through. Whereas hey, we have that little gap there. You're going to want to make sure that you write these letters clearly because they can be easily confused for each other. And so here's with hey, our rough breathing, our h. With our het, we have a h sound. Back in the back of the throat, kind of like a German Bach, but maybe even a little bit stronger than that. And after our het, we have our tet. And tet has a little tilde here in the middle that you start with. You sort of go up and then around to make this letter. And this is our first T sound. But it's not quite a hard T where you press your tongue up against the back of your teeth to make it. Rather, this is one where you put your tongue sort of in between your top and bottom teeth and give a t, t. It's a little bit softer. I'm not going to make a huge deal in pronunciation for that, but just so you know that it is there. It is a little bit different. After tet, we have yod, and yod is our smallest letter. It's easy to get left behind. Notice it's just a little, almost looks like an apostrophe. Yod is our Y sound. It can also function as a vowel carrier, just like Y in English can as well. Now after yod, we have a letter that takes on a couple of different forms, and that is Kaf. And Kaf looks like a backwards C, and often has a dagish. But it can also appear without. The dagish is a hard K sound, K. Without the dagish, it's a softer K. Not quite as harsh as het, but a little bit harder and more guttural than a K sound, more like the German Bach. But notice it's not Bach. We don't say Johannes Sebastian Bach, but rather Johannes Sebastian Bach. Just a little bit there. Now the thing about Kaf is it's our first letter that can appear with a final form. If Kaf shows up in a word at the beginning or in the middle somewhere, it will look like this. If it's at the end of the word, it will always look like this. It will go below the line. It will look almost like a dalet, except it will be longer. And normally it will appear with some sort of other nikud, whether that's a kametz or sometimes a dagish. We'll get to that much later in the semester, but often with a shva in there. And so this is our first with a final form. It will always appear like this at the end of the word. It will never appear like this. Just like in the middle of a word or beginning of the word, it will never appear like this. It will always appear like this. Our next set of consonants starts with our lamed. Lamed is a stroke down, stroke over, and stroke down. Sort of like a little lightning bolt, as it were. And lamed is our L sound, ul, ul. And after that, we have our mem, which is a stroke up. Sort of you're making a triangle, and then you tap it with the little ding sort of thing. And mem is our sound for M, mm. And it sort of looks like a wave, kind of. That might be a way to think of it. It also has a final form. And it gets a bit boxy at the end. And so you draw it sort of like a little box that's connected with, once again, our tilde off to the side. And here's our little tilde there too. You can mark that as well. Now we could do that on the Kaf too. Why not? Tildes for everyone. After mem, we have noon. which sort of looks like a bet, but notice it's thinner and has no tilde. This is our N sound, n. It also has a final form, a line across, short line across, and then a line down below the line. Now notice here this could be easily confused with vav, except it's longer and it's got a little bit of a sharper tilde up here at the top. After noon, we have our samech, and samech is our first S sound. And it is just a circle with a little tilde here on the end. It is just a straight S sound. After that, we have ayin. Line up and a line down. And ayin is another silent letter. It technically is a glottal stop, sort of like the sound you make in the middle of the word bottle. Well, that sort of, it stops at your glottis. This sort of comes through famously in the book of Genesis. There's a town that gets destroyed that we call Gomorrah, but if you look at the Hebrew, there is no gimel at the front. Rather, it is an ayin. So it originally would have been pronounced Amora, Amora. And so you can hear how that would get changed into a G if it's heard by speakers who don't have the glottal stop. And so we spell it Gomorrah, but it's actually Amora. All right, after ayin, we have peh. And peh is another one of our letters that often appears with the dagish or not, and it changes the pronunciation. So with the dagish, we have a hard P sound, p, p. Without the dagish, it is more of a PH or an F sound, f, f. So p and f. This also has a final form, which will always be pronounced with the F sound because it will never take the dagish. And it sort of is as if you took the tail of the peh and just brought it and straightened it down. And so it's got that little curve at the beginning in there and then goes around, sort of looks like a staff. That is our F sound or our P sound, p and f. Our next letter is another T sound, but a little bit different from maybe what we would expect. It is our tsada. And it sort of is a half triangle, if you will, or 2/3 triangle, I guess, with a tilde there. Sort of looks like a tree, as it were. And this is a TS sound. So it's not a straight T, it's not a straight S. It's like if you say cats. Cats. You get the T and the S together as one sound. So ts, ts is what you're looking for with tsade. And it also has a final form. It's as if, once again, you straighten this line out here at the bottom, but you still have the same branch off of it, if you will, tsade. And that will have the same pronunciation, whether it's in the regular or the final form. After this, we have kof, kof. Now notice this is not kof like a K, but kof like a Q. It's a bit farther back in the throat. Kof. And it looks like a P, unfortunately. But it is pronounced kof or k, k. After this, we have resh, our R sound. Resh is an interesting letter because it often functions as what we will call a little bit later a guttural, and it is just our R sound. Resh. All right, our next letter is actually one letter, but it's two letters in lexicon, so we're going to sort of count it as two, and that is shin and sin. What you do is you sort of make a W, as it were, but you start off by making the outside as a single curve, add a line in the middle, and if it's a shin, it gets a dot over the right hand, as it were. If it's a sin, it gets a dot over the left hand, as it were. Now, how is it that you can tell these apart and sort of remember this? Well, as one student of mine very aptly and wisely said, sin is never right. The dot will never be on the right hand of the sin because sin is never right. I like that. I like that. I think that works well. And so shin is an SH sound, sh, sh, as in shibboleth. Sin is very similar in sound to samek. It's just a straight S sound, s, s. And you can hear that in the name, shin and sin. And our last letter is tav, and this is another one that can take a dagish. And it looks a whole lot like a het, except there's a little curved tilde at the end. So notice the difference there. And this is another one of those that can take the doggish, although the sound is not going to be made any different. But notice it's got a tilde off to the side, and it's got a tilde down below to distinguish it. And here's our hard T, our t, t sound, as opposed to our tet, which was t, t. Very similar. I'm not going to make a huge deal in pronunciation, but that's how you write the letters, and that's how you speak the letters. And it's good to practice this over and over and over again to make sure that you are doing it correctly and getting all the sounds that you want to get and feeling comfortable writing the letters.